everybody, it's Sarah, and first of all, I am sorry that yesterday's video is a day late. The reason for that, I mean, it would have been late probably anyways because I started filming quite late yesterday, but another reason for that is that my SD card was full while filming yesterday, and when I went to make some space on the SD card, I accidentally deleted one of the files that I should not have deleted off of the SD card, and so I lost half of my footage, and I just did not have the energy to refilm yesterday. I was so pissed. I was so pissed at myself. So yeah, today's video is going to be split into 2/3 parts actually, because, you know, you're gonna have this first part, which is filmed today, the day that you will see this video, which is me refilming something. Then you will see the part that I actually saved from yesterday's video, or that I kept from yesterday's video, and then at the end you will see me from today again, filming the stuff that I didn't get around to filming yesterday. But anyway, what are we gonna talk about today? As you can probably tell by the title, today we will talk about my January wrap-up, and I am just looking down on my phone right now because I decided that I wanted to do stats again. I wanted to start my wrap-up videos with stats again, so that is what we are going to do today. And my stats for January were as follows. I read a total of 10 books with 4,297 pages. The stats that I have, by the way, are all from Storygraph because they give you such pretty stats. So I was like, you know what, why not use that? The main moods that I read in were adventurous, emotional, challenging, dark, and mysterious, which, to be honest, for a person who mainly reads fantasy, I think those moods are quite common. In terms of pace, most of the books that I read this month, 60% were medium paced according to Storygraph, or according to Storygraph readers. Then 30% were slow paced and 10% were fast paced. In terms of page number, 2 of the books that I read, so 20%, were over 500 pages. 2 of the books, 20%, were under 300 pages, and the other 6 books, 60%, were between 500 and 300 pages, or 300 and 500 pages, that way around. I only finished fiction books in January. I have not yet finished any non-fiction. And in terms of genres, I mean, obviously, like, the genres, once again, it's kind of dependent on which genres readers put those books in on Storygraph, but most of the books that I read in January were fantasy, then LGBTQIA, science fiction, speculative fiction, race, whatever that genre is supposed to be, young adult, and romance. In terms of format, I read 80% print and 20% digital. Languages, for some reason Storygraph tells me that one of the books that I read was in French. I did only read English books this month, however. And then the star ratings were as follows. I had 1 2.5 star, 1 3 star, 1 3.25 stars, then 2 each of 3.5 stars, 4 stars, and 4.5 stars, and then I had 1 5-star read in January. I also read like almost every day in January. I tried the January Pages Challenge, which is like this yearly challenge on Storygraph, which is basically try to read at least 1 page a day or listen to 1 minute of audiobook a day. And yeah, I was really good at that, but then I just forgot that I was doing that challenge, and so I didn't read it all for 5 or 6 days, and then I started back up again because I remembered. And then also some stats that Storygraph didn't give me, but that I still want to include or start including once again in my stats at the beginning of the video. What did I read in terms of diversity in January of 2023? Like 2 to 3, I would say, books that I read in January included different representation or included different types of disability as well as mental health rep. Then all of the books that I finished in January had different types of LGBTQIA rep. I don't know which ones exactly in which book right now. But yeah, all of the books had LGBTQIA rep, and then 8 out of the 10 books that I read this month had BIPOC authors, mainly Black authors or authors of Asian heritage. So yeah, now that we have the stats done, let me quickly tell you which books I am currently reading, just so you're up to date with my reading, and then we'll get into my thoughts on the books that I finished. So in terms of books that I started reading, and I won't give you a summary of these books because then the video will definitely get too long, I finally started Orientalism by Edward Said, and I am about 10 pages into this, although there's like a preface that's, you know, not numbered with pages, but with Roman numerals. I don't know. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about if you have read academic nonfiction before. I also started a second nonfiction, which is Silk Roads by Peter Frankopan. I don't know exactly how far I'm into this because I'm listening to it on audio, but I think I'm about 2-ish hours into this book. Another audiobook I started was Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. I'm about halfway-ish through that one. I just haven't continued on with it because the next chapter that I'm listening to is like 6 hours long, or 3 hours at a 2.5 speed, and I just like to finish the chapters, especially when I listen to it on audiobook. So I've just been struggling continuing on with this book, and I am, by the way, listening to the full cast version of the audiobook. I am actually quite enjoying it, although I might still try to check out the book from the library. And then the other 2 books that I also started in January are, first of all, A Bond Undone by Jin Young, which is the second book in the Legends of the Condor Heroes, and I'm about 150 pages into this. And the second one is Heart of the Sun Warrior by Su Lin Tan, and I am about 100 pages into this one. And so yeah, now we have that out of the way, and now let's get into the books that I read in January. As always, I will go in order of how much I enjoyed the books. However, this month usually I start with my rereads. This month I don't have any rereads, so we can jump right into the books that I read for the first time. But first, I have to change the battery. So the battery is back in, so let's start with the book that I enjoyed the least in January, so my 2.5 star read, and that was The Art of Prophecy by Wesley Chu, which is the first book in the War Art saga, which, sadly, this was a somewhat anticipated release for me, of 2022. I was really excited to get to this book because the concept of this book sounded right up my alley and really interesting. Basically what this is it's a subversion of the Chosen One trope. You have the Chosen One who, since he was a small child, has been trained to defeat this evil, I'm gonna call it a king. He has been trained to fight this big enemy of his empire. However, at the very beginning of this book, this enemy is killed. So now our hero, our Chosen One, has 2 issues. First of all, the powers that be, the people in power, kind of want him dead. They want him out of the way because they are scared, since he's the center of this religion, of this prophecy, that people will still flock to him and kind of away from them as the most powerful ones. So they want him dead. And the second issue that our hero has is he had this destiny for his whole life, and now he has to find a new one. He has to find a new role for himself in life while also staying alive. And he basically only has one person on his side, who is this very grumpy old woman who is a master of martial arts, who is a legendary warrior. And yeah, she's kind of trying her best to keep him alive, and also finding out what the fuck went wrong with this prophecy. So it sounds really interesting, and it sounds like something right up my alley. Like, grumpy old martial arts master mentor type characters are literally my favorite type character since I was just, you know, a tiny little reader starting to read fantasy. And I love a subversion of very common tropes in fantasy. So why did I then still only give this 2.5 stars, even though, you know, it seems like it would be the perfect book for me? It all pretty much comes down to writing style. Like, this is a writing style that I would compare possibly to Brandon Sanderson. And if you've been on my channel for a little bit, you will know that I am not necessarily a fan of Brandon Sanderson's writing. I think his writing generally is approachable, which is his goal, obviously, but for me, writing just does a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to immersion, when it comes to world building, and so on. And so when you have a writing style that is very straightforward, but doesn't feel like it's purposefully straightforward, like it's just that is the writing style that happened to be the easiest to write for the author or something along those lines. I don't know how to explain it. That's like basically just a tool where there were no thoughts put into the words, where the writing doesn't feel purposeful. Then I just sometimes have a hard time connecting to the characters. Also, some of the descriptions, like sometimes it felt like this author wanted to go into the direction of the absurd with some of his descriptions, but he didn't really commit enough for me to work. And so yeah, there were just a lot of issues that I had with the writing style. I do think that there's definitely a readership of people out there. For example, I do think if you don't mind Brandon Sanderson's writing style, if you like Brandon Sanderson's writing style, I think this might be something that's up your alley. However, for me, it just didn't work. I didn't connect to the characters, and I just thought the book overall was meh. And then also, I would have given it 3 stars, to be honest, but then I read another book at the same time, and I also didn't particularly vibe with that other book, but I also just felt like I couldn't give both of those books the same star rating, so I had to drag this a little bit lower. And that just tells you how subjective star ratings are, even when it just comes to one reader. Like, you won't have consistency in star rating even with just one reader. But yeah, sadly did not work for me. Next, I have another book from an author where I just think sadly this author's writing is just not for me. And the book I'm talking about is The Red Skull is Wake by Aliette de Bodard. This was the buddy read for my book club for January. My book club is of course of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, and it's all about reading one adult fantasy book and now also sometimes science fiction book by women and genderqueer folks. And yeah, as I said, this was the buddy read for January. This is a standalone, by the way, although I do believe that this is part of like a broader world somehow. Like, I think Aliette de Bodard has multiple stories set within the same world. And what this is basically like science fiction with a heavy subplot on romance, some politics, some like mystery type stuff going on. You have 2 central characters. One of those is a bot maker, the other one is a sentient ship. And the sentient ship is basically currently the captain of a pirate fleet. The reason why she's the captain is because her wife, who was actually the captain, was killed in an ambush. And so she kind of entrusts the bot maker, who at the beginning of all of this was a prisoner on the ship, was a prisoner of the pirate fleet. She entrusts the bot maker with trying to find out like who got her wife into that ambush. And to do that and to make this bot maker more safe, the 2 of them go into an arranged marriage type deal, or marriage of convenience type deal. So why was this one not for me? I think there's just something about Aliette de Bodard's writing that I can't really put my finger on, where I just have a problem engaging with her stories. Like, I previously had read one thing by her, which was Fireheart Tiger. I had a similar issue there. However, I thought that was because it was a novella, and novellas being shorter, of course, sometimes you just don't get as immersed in the stories. At least I don't. However, after now having read this one as well, I think it just might be that her writing is not for me. And by the way, while I do think that with this one right here, The Art of Prophecy, I don't think the writing is the best writing out there. I don't really think that there's anything wrong with Aliette de Bodard's writing. I just don't think it's for me. I wasn't really engaged in the romance. I wasn't really all that into the politics. I would have wished actually for there to be more of a focus on the politics. And yeah, there were just a bunch of issues that I had with this book. However, I will upload a full review of this probably next week or the week after, so if you're interested in my full thoughts on this book, then wait for that and go and check it out. Next, I want to talk about my 3.25 star book. That was Vevin Song by Jonathan Neves Myers. I hope I pronounced that name correctly, and I was given an e-arc of this book in return for an honest review, which will be up this Saturday, not Saturday, Sunday or Monday. I will probably upload that review, so I will keep my thoughts short on this one as well. And this one is another book that's more in the direction of science fiction. I would probably call this post-apocalyptic sci-fi. Basically, a bunch of years ago, these beings landed on Earth that were called Lightbirds by humans, and they are way faster, way stronger than humans. However, they have one issue: they kind of just, you know, disintegrate when they come in contact with water. And so what humans did is they built this cocoon underwater, and that is how they live now. And their society has changed a lot. Everyone has just roles that they are given, and some of them go back to the surface to try and find, you know, just resources and stuff to bring them back to the cocoon, and so on. Our main character, Marla, has been given the job of a teacher, and she hates the job. And so basically she's just living day to day, not really enjoying much of anything really, until one day those things change. And I don't even want to say that much more, because I feel like I'm now getting into spoiler territory already. But yeah, in the course of the story, she just finds out some things. She finds out why those strange beings landed on Earth, what happened to them, and how maybe some things aren't as black and white as other humans think they are. So what did I think of it? Like, on the one hand, I did have some issues with it. Like, it took me some time to get into the writing style. I did enjoy it by the end though. I overall really enjoyed the world building. I enjoyed the characters. I sometimes had troubles like engaging with the plot, but I think that was more down to just post-apocalyptic science fiction not really being my favorite genre ever. And so, you know, I don't know how to put it, but like for me, the reason why I love fantasy so much is like I kind of love the atmosphere and the vibes. And with post-apocalyptic stuff, for some reason, like science fiction-y stuff in general, some of that is just, you know, not there for me, so I generally have a harder time getting into it. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I will talk more about the positives and the negatives in my review. But yeah, I think I can actually really recommend it. I think it's gonna come out on the 7th, if I'm not completely mistaken. So yeah, if the book sounds interesting to you, then definitely go and check it out. So the last book before you get to see me from yesterday that I want to talk about is my first 3.5 star read, and that was Girls of Fate and Fury by Natasha Ngan, which is the third and last book in the Girls of Paper and Fire series. And I was really pleasantly surprised by this. This is a YA high fantasy, and of course I don't really read YA that much anymore. Also, I'm sorry, but my nose is really itchy right now. I feel like I have a hair there or something. Anyway, I don't really read YA that much anymore, and so I thought that I was just picking this up to finally finish the series, to finally be done with it and whatever. And then I'm probably gonna unhaul the series or whatever, because I also really wasn't the biggest fan of the second book, to be honest. But first, let me talk about what this series is about. This series is set in this world where basically you have three different castes. You have papers, you have beings that are kind of mixed that I forgot the name of, and then you have demons. And papers are basically humans, and the demons are the ones in power. Now, every year or every few years, I don't really remember, the Demon King chooses so-called paper girls. He chooses girls from the paper caste to become his concubines. Our main character, Lei, is chosen to be such a concubine, but it's kind of weird because there's already the full number of concubines chosen, so she's kind of a +1. And so the first book is her just dealing with being chosen to be a paper girl, also with getting in contact with a rebellion, with the paper rebellion, and so on. And then the second and third book continue that plot. Now, I didn't particularly enjoy the second book. A main reason for that was that I just didn't think the chemistry between our two main characters, between our main character and our love interest, was there anymore. This is Sapphic as well, by the way. And I still didn't think the chemistry was there 100% in the last book. However, like, a reason why I enjoyed it more, I think, was that the two characters just didn't spend a lot of time together on page. And then something else, by the way, when it comes to the main romance, and I won't say how it ends, I won't say if it ends in a way where I enjoyed it or where I didn't enjoy it, and I think my rating of 3.5 stars also doesn't give away a lot. But I just don't think that those two characters should end up together. Like, while I was reading the book, I won't tell you if they end up together or not, but my thought while I was reading the book was constantly just like, I don't want the two of them to end up together. Like, they're bad for each other. They're really, really toxic. Please don't end up together. But again, no spoilers if they end up together or not. And yeah, the reason I think why I really enjoyed this series and this book is because for a YA series, it deals with like seriously dark topics, but in a very concise manner without shying away from things. And I think it's the perfect proof that you can talk about those things in YA series as well. Because the series, obviously, our main character is chosen to be a concubine within the first book. So this series deals a lot with trauma coming from sexual assault, and it doesn't shy away from talking about that. It also doesn't shy away from talking about toxic relationships. It doesn't shy away from talking about toxic relationships within families. And there's just a lot of stuff in here that I really appreciate and that I think is really important for there to be space for that in YA and also in YA fantasy. And so yeah, I think actually the series is a really great series overall. So the next 3.5 stars I have is a book that once again was one of those books where it's just like, yeah, I can see that this is a stellar book, like an actually really, really gorgeous and good book. It just really wasn't for me. And that book was An Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon. By the way, the tabs in this aren't for me. This book was lent to me by a friend. And in this one, I actually can't really tell you what it's about because it's so much just vibes. We follow our main character who, by the way, I'm not sure if it's confirmed, but who at least is very heavily coded autistic. And yeah, Esther. It says so on the back. So we follow Esther, and Esther lives on this spaceship basically that is distinguished in different levels. And in some levels, like the higher ups live, and in other levels the occupants are kind of seen as a bit of less. And Esther is also assistant to the ship surgeon. And then there's also something going on with basically like the emperor of the ship and kind of wanting to not cancel him. Oh my god, I am so in Twitter speak right now for some reason. Overthrow, like something about overthrowing the emperor and tyranny, and yeah, there's a lot going on, but there's not a lot of explanation. Like, the timeline to me also a lot of times wasn't quite clear. I mean, for me, it's also a thing with how I read. I just sometimes have difficulties gathering all the information from some books, especially if they're very detail scarce, I would say. Like, if details are mentioned once and that's it, and then they're not repeated, which obviously in a lot of fantasy books isn't the case. A lot of times things will come up again and again, but I don't tend to read every single word or sometimes even every single line in a book. And so if it's a book where missing a line can easily lead to you not really getting something, I sometimes have difficulties with those books. And I feel like this was that type of book, because I feel like there wasn't a lot of information given, but very much on purpose, because this book was so much just vibes, but at the same time so much happened. I just don't know what exactly happened. And so sometimes I just got confused with the chronological order within this book, because I don't think like all chapters were told chronologically, and also the way some of the information was given. Also, this is a very well thought out world. It feels like it, but I don't think we actually got a lot of exposition in terms of how the world works. But at the same time, the writing style of this is really well done, and you just really notice when you read this book that all those things that I just explained, they are that way very much on purpose. Like, this book is written like that because it's meant to be written like that. And with those books, I just kind of have a hard time judging them because, you know, I know that the reason why I maybe didn't have the best time with them is purely because I just didn't vibe with them, not because they're a bad book. And by the way, this is the book that I talked about when I said I finished those two on the same day. And it just felt bad to me to give those two the same rating, because while I think there is a readership out there for this book I just think is objectively way better. Like, I'm not sure if more people will read this book than this one, but this feels more intentional. And for me, like, intentionality is just something that I really appreciate in books and that I think is really great. And for me is a marker of a great book. Again, with books, a lot of things are subjective. So yeah, I just ended up giving it 3.5 stars. But I think especially if you enjoy sci-fi, especially if you enjoy vibes-based books, An Unkindness of Ghosts will really be for you. So next I have my 2 4-star reads. First, I have another arc that was given to me in turn for an honest review. Although I did tell the author that I probably won't do a dedicated like video review for it because it's just a novella and, well, just a novella. It's a novella and I sometimes have a hard time, you know, filming a full dedicated review for a novella and finding enough stuff to say. But anyway, the novella is called To Kill a Necromancer by C.M. Alongi, which comes out at the end of February. I'm not exactly sure on which one though. I believe like the 25th or something was when this comes out. And in March, actually, the second part of this novella series is already going to come out. And this one actually really surprised me. As I said, I ended up giving it 4 stars, which I don't do a lot for novellas. Like, not even novellas in series that I love. Like, even when I loved Brandon Sanderson, I did not particularly care for a lot of his novellas. And so this is, I don't want to say too much because obviously it's a novella, but what this is about is there's like necromancers and paladins, and they had a war like ages ago. And our main character is a paladin who is sent to kill a necromancer. Obviously, it comes from the title. However, she finds out that maybe some things are a bit different than she thought when it comes to necromancers. And that's basically what the first one is about. And it's just 100 pages on an ebook, which means it's probably even less, or would be less if it was a printed format. And for how little we got so much set up for the characters already, like the main character and the main side character. I don't think there will be that many other recurring characters, to be honest, in the series. We got a lot of world building already. We got set up for the character development for our main character. Like, we already saw a little bit of change, but we mostly, you know, set the character up to where her character will go in the future, probably, I guess. And yeah, there were just a lot of things packed into this novella that I really enjoyed. I also just really enjoyed the vibes. I like necromancers, you know, sue me, I guess. That just really surprised me, which sounds so mean when I say it like this. Like, I did not expect this book to be bad. That's not what I meant, but I am typically someone, I don't like love novellas. I give them 3 stars, maybe 3.5 stars, because I just prefer more extensive world building and more extensive storytelling than novellas can give me, just because, you know, of the limitations of the medium. However, this, even though it was a novella, gave me a lot of what I already would you know, expect from a longer fantasy novel. So yeah, I'm definitely excited to see where the series goes in the future. Since we're already at novella, let's talk about another novella author where I do actually really love the novellas, but that's because of the format that these novellas have. And I'm talking about Into the Riverlands by Nivo, which is the third book in the Into the Singing Hills novella series. And the reason why I really love novellas with these ones is because the setup of this entire series is you have our main character T, and T is a monk. And what they do is they travel the land and they collect stories. And basically each of the books is them meeting someone else and that person telling them their story. And yeah, I can't really say that much about it because it's the third book in the series. I really love them. I think I enjoyed this one possibly the least out of the 3 books so far. Like, I definitely enjoyed When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain, so the second book, more than this one. I can't remember if I enjoyed The Empress of Salt and Fortune more or if I enjoyed this one more. I just need to give all of them a reread at some point, to be honest. But yeah, Nivo is obviously one of my favorite writers ever. She is just, I love her writing style and I can just highly recommend all of her books. But yeah, definitely if you want to get a vibe of what her writing is like, these are a good place to start. So since I was just like in the novella mindset, I forgot to talk about my second 4-star read, and that was The Blind King's Wrath by Ashok K. Banker, which is the third and final book in the Burnt Empire saga. I finished 2 series this month. I also started 3 more, so you know, did not bring me much, but I'm trying, okay? I also caught up to another one, so it's not that bad, is what I'm telling myself. Actually, I didn't start 3, I started 4 series. Oh my god. I will never get to a 0 series TBR. Anyway, The Burnt Empire saga. Ashok K. Banker is an Indian author, and The Burnt Empire is his first fantasy series that he wrote specifically for a US and Western market. It's kind of a retelling, kind of inspired by the Mahabharata, which is one of the 2 big Indian epics. I don't know if I should say retelling or inspired because I am not familiar enough with Indian mythology to say which of the 2 it is, but it's definitely inspired. Like, you have a lot of characters who are directly taken from the Mahabharata. Among others are 2 main characters from the first book, who are Shwata and Adri. The 2 of them were born and they are the heirs to the Burnt Empire. In this empire, the way the next emperor is chosen is that all the heirs get set down on the burning throne, and then the throne chooses the next heir by, you know, burning and not burning them. And so both Shwata and Adri passed this test, so it's kind of confusing who's gonna be the heir. But then another one comes along with his daughter and also puts his daughter on the burning throne because he says, hey, she's technically also an heir to this empire, and the throne once again burns as well. And so a whole lot of shit gets started. I kind of want to do a full review of this whole series because this series is wild, to be honest. It is not written like your typical Western fantasy series. The writing style very much is in the way of old epics, as in like a woman births 100 children, like that. Like there's very random thing, or one of the characters just pulls swords from her mouth and from, you know, inside of her. There's a lot of stuff like that. I love it. It's absolutely wild, and I just really enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed this last book the most in the series because it's quite short compared to the other 2. Like, it's under 400 pages. I think the other 2 are almost at and just over 600 pages. And I think with this writing style, I did have some troubles getting into some of the characters, or getting into a lot of the characters, because we switch perspectives quite quick, and we don't really spend a lot of time in each perspective. And so I think with that, and coupled with the writing style, which, as I said, it's just wild, I think the shorter format just helped me a lot to enjoy it more. So yeah, but I can definitely recommend the series, especially if you want to just read something different within the fantasy genre. Then let's go to my second 4.5 star, and that was Black Leopard Red Wolf by Marlon James, which is the first book in the I don't know what it's called series, to be honest. I think the Tracker series or something. And Marlon James is a Caribbean author. He is from Jamaica. He was born there and he grew up there. And this world is a very kind of inspired by a mythical Africa and different African cultures. And in this story we follow Tracker, who is our main character, who is this hunter who is pretty well known. And one day he is told to search for this boy. And on the search for this boy, he has a few companions who are quite strange. Like one of them is a shape-shifting leopard, another one is a witch, then you have a giant. There's a lot of very, you know, weird and amazing characters. So why did I give this 4.5 stars? Once again, this is a book where throughout half of it I did not know what was going on, because stuff just changed so quickly and we jumped in time a lot actually between the chapters. However, I just really like the writing style of this. Like, I love books where I can just read the inspiration, or like, I don't want to say the heritage, but you know, the storytelling history that this book is based on. Like, when I read this book, I was reminded a lot of how different tales from Africa that I've read over the course of my life, how those are told, and about the weird things that happen in those tales. And I just really liked that inspiration. I also really found it interesting because there are almost no dialogue tags, like neither action tags nor dialogue tags. You just have the dialogue, which sometimes makes it confusing to follow who is saying what. However, I don't know. I just love it when authors make choices with the writing and you can just tell those choices were very purposeful, and they made those choices not to please a reader or anything, but because this is how they want to write, and this is the writing that they are inspired by when they tell their stories. So yeah, I just really love this book. I think it's not going to be a book for everyone, I do have to say that, especially when you are not very open when it comes to different storytelling techniques, and when you just prefer to read familiar stuff. But overall, I would still really recommend this one. I loved it. So now I am back again, today's Sarah, I think, or whatever, with the last book that I wanted to talk about today, which is my 5-star read. This also was the book that I started out my year with. And I don't know, it's actually kind of funny because I had this book on 5-star predictions videos or lists before, but then I took it away from those predictions. Like I said, actually no, I'm not feeling like it's gonna be a 5-star anymore. And now it ended up being a 5-star. And that book is The Forever Sea by Joshua Philip Johnson. This book, like, it's not a book where I would say, you know, it's the best written book ever, or it does something incredibly new or whatever, but it's just, you know, it's fresh enough and different enough from other books that it just brings something new to the table, and it just had a lot of elements that I incredibly enjoyed and that I had so much fun with that I just had to give it 5 stars. Now, what is this book about? This series is set in a world where you have this big grass sea, and what the grass sea is basically like, it's miles high grass, and above that grass ships are sailing. These ships are flying with something called hearthfire, but to keep the hearthfire alive, you need someone called a keeper aboard. Our main character is such a keeper. She is not just anyone, however. She is the granddaughter of one of the most legendary hearthfire keepers out there. And after she comes back to her home city after having been gone for a while, after having traveled on the ship that she's currently on and whatever, she finds out that her grandmother has vanished. She has vanished by walking down into the grass sea, which people don't do because there's monsters there and stuff. And so our named character, whose name is Kindred, decides to try and find her grandmother again. Now, like, some of the things that I enjoyed so much about this were the magic system, because it's one of those magic systems that's not over-explained. Like, it's somewhat explained, like there's rules to the magic system, but it's not explained or over-explained why those rules work. Like, it's not made all scientific, which obviously is one of my main complaints with a lot of magic systems currently, that, you know, I read fantasy for the magic, not to turn magic into science. This one is not that at all. It also has a framing device that I really enjoy. It has the framing device of it all being a story that a storyteller tells to a group of people. I really enjoyed the characters. I actually found it really interesting because, like, very few of the characters are actually physically described. Like, they have some physical traits that are described. Sometimes some hair is described, maybe an eye color. Maybe if they have tattoos or not, but that's actually the most common descriptor, like if they have tattoos or not, or, you know, if a limb or an eye or whatever is missing, a scar maybe. But aside from that, in terms of, for example, skin color, there's nothing described there really. You're completely free to imagine the characters to look whichever way, which I actually really appreciated. And yeah, just overall, I really enjoyed the characters, I really enjoyed the writing, I really enjoyed the world building. There was just so much good about this book, and I just had a lot of fun with it. So I ended up giving it 5 stars. That was it for all the books that I read in January. Tell me in the comments down below if you have read any of these books. What were your thoughts on them? Did I make you want to pick up some of those books maybe? If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media as well as to my book club are linked down below, so go and check those out, and I hope I'll see you very soon. Bye!